I never meant to catch her. Hell, I'd been hoping for something more along the lines of that six-legged rabbit creature I'd tracked 4 weeks. Something to eat to survive another day on this god-forsaken alien world. The morning had started like any other since my self-imposed exile. The twin suns were barely peeking through the dense canopy of luminescent blue-green trees surrounding my makeshift cabin. I'd built it with my own hands, fallen logs, alien vines, tougher than steel cable, and the remnants of my escape pod. Not exactly 5-star accommodations, but it kept the rain out and the local predators guessing. I checked my snares one by one. Empty. Empty. Triggered but empty. Then I came to the last one, my newest design, a gravity-assisted net trap I'd rigged from salvaged ship materials and native fibers. That's when I heard it, a soft whimpering sound, almost musical in its cadence. I parted the thick undergrowth and froze. Suspended 6 feet off the ground was the most beautiful being I'd ever seen. Violet skin that seemed to shimmer with an internal light. Silver hair that moved like liquid mercury. And eyes, God, those eyes wide with terror in the color of the amethyst sunrise I'd grown accustomed to over the past 3 years. "Please," she whispered in perfect, albeit strangely accented English, "don't eat me." I couldn't help it. I laughed. Her eyes widened further, if that was even possible. I managed between chuckles. "I don't eat people." "But you are human," she said with such conviction that it sobered me instantly. "Humans are apex predators, biological terrors. You consume the flesh of sentient beings." I approached slowly, hands raised to show I meant no harm. "I think there's been a misunderstanding about my species. Let me help you down." She flinched when I drew my knife, but relaxed slightly when I used it only to cut the supporting rope. I caught her weight as the net collapsed, surprised at how light she was, despite being nearly my height. Her skin felt like warm silk beneath my calloused hands. "My name is Jason," I said as I set her gently on her feet. "Jason Holt, former Lieutenant Earth Expeditionary Force. Now just a man trying to survive." She stepped back, studying me with those impossible eyes. "I am Lyra Vela," she said, straightening her shoulders with sudden dignity. "Third sign of the House of Eternal Light, heir to the crystal throne of Vanar." She paused, then added more quietly, "And I am running for my life." I've seen my share of desperate people. Hell, I became one myself when I abandoned my post and fled into the untamed wilderness of this planet. But something about the way Lyra held herself regal, even in tattered clothes that must have once been finery, told me her situation was dire. "Come on," I said, gesturing toward my cabin. "You look like you could use some food that isn't me." A small smile flickered across her face. Progress. My home wasn't much. One room with a bed of woven fibers, a table I'd carved from a fallen tree, shelves lined with makeshift tools and containers of preserved foods. My rifle, the one thing I'd never part with, hung on the wall beside the only photo I had left my sister back on Earth, smiling from a time before everything went wrong. Lyra moved around the space with obvious curiosity, occasionally reaching out to touch things before pulling her hand back, as if remembering herself. "Your weapons are primitive," she observed, examining my handmade bow. "They get the job done," I replied, heating water over my cooking fire. "When all your fancy tech fails, sometimes the old ways work best." She nodded thoughtfully. "That's why they haven't found you." I stiffened. "Who's they?" Lyra sat on the edge of my bed, suddenly looking exhausted. "My uncle's hunters. They rely on quantum signatures, biological scanners, predictive algorithms." She gestured around the cabin. "But you've gone, what do humans call it? Off-grid." "Something like that." I handed her a steaming cup of local herbs I'd found had tea-like properties. "Why are they hunting you?" Her fingers wrapped around the cup, absorbing its warmth. "Politics. Power. The eternal story. My father was killed 3 lunar cycles ago. Official statement, a hunting accident." She took a sip and closed her eyes briefly. "There is nothing accidental about a precision plasma wound to the back of the skull." Your uncle?" She nodded. "As regent, he controls everything until I reach the age of ascension, which would be in 6 lunar cycles." A bitter smile crossed her face. "Convenient timing for my unfortunate accident, don't you think?" I leaned against the rough wall. "And you fled into the wilderness, brave choice for royalty." "Not brave, desperate." She met my eyes directly. The wilderness was my only option. They control the spaceports, the cities, the transport networks. But they fear what they call the dead zones areas, where technology becomes unpredictable due to mineral deposits, like this forest. So you ran right into the most dangerous territory on the planet. Yes, she said simply. And then I ran into you, which our educational text would suggest was an even greater danger. I couldn't help but smile. What exactly do your texts say about humans? Leary blushed a deeper shade of violet. That you're violent, unpredictable predators. That you conquered your way across your solar system through sheer bloodthirsty determination. That you, she hesitated, consume the flesh of other sentient beings for pleasure as well as sustenance. I laughed again. We're omnivores, yes, but we don't eat people, of any species. Oh. She looked genuinely relieved, then confused. But the aggression, the stories of human warfare, those, I said, my smile fading, might have some truth to them. We lapsed into silence. Outside the alien forest, constant symphony of clicks, whistles, and low humming continued unabated. Why are you here alone? She finally asked. Your kind usually travels in military units. The question hit too close to home. I busied myself with preparing a simple meal of local tubers and the last of my preserved meat. Long story. I have time, she said, unless you're planning to turn me over to my uncle's hunters. I placed a plate before her. No, I'm not in the habit of sending people to their deaths. Even aliens, she asked, watching me closely. I met her gaze steadily, especially aliens who haven't done anything wrong. Something passed between us then, a moment of understanding perhaps, or the beginning of trust. Larry took a tentative bite of food, then another with more enthusiasm. This is surprisingly good. 3 years of trial and error, I said. You learn what's edible and what'll have you puking for days. She nodded appreciatively. You've adapted well to Vanar. Most off-worlders struggle with our atmosphere, our food. Necessity is a hell of a teacher. As she ate, I found myself studying her more carefully. The way her silver hair caught the light filtering through my crude windows, the elegant movements of her hands, the subtle pattern of lighter markings across her violet skin, like constellations on an alien sky. You're staring, she said without looking up. Sorry, not many visitors out here. When she finished eating, she helped me clean up. Our hands brushed briefly as she passed me a plate, and I felt a strange electrical sensation where our skin touched. She felt it too, I could tell by the way her breath caught. Thank you, she said formally, stepping back. For the food, for not eating me. That small smile again. I should leave soon. My presence puts you in danger. Where will you go? Leary glanced toward the door. Deeper into the dead zone, there are caves to the north that might shield me better. Those caves are home to the shadow stalkers, I said. Trust me, you don't want to meet them. I don't have many options. I found myself speaking before I'd fully thought it through. Stay here, at least for a few days. I know this area, the dangers, how to avoid detection. I can help you. Surprise flashed across her face. Why would you risk yourself for me? A good question. One I wasn't entirely sure I could answer. Let's just say I know what it's like to be hunted, I replied. Days turned into weeks. Lerai and I fell into a rhythm of sorts. I taught her how to move silently through the forest, how to find water, how to hide from both the natural predators and the occasional patrol that ventured too close to my territory. In return, she taught me about her people, their customs, their technology. The Vanar were an ancient race, she explained. They'd achieved space travel when humans were still figuring out agriculture. But somewhere along the way, they'd stagnated, become too dependent on their technology, lost the spirit of innovation that had once driven them to the stars. That's why they fear humans so much, she said one night as we sat before the fire. Your species accomplishes in decades what took us millennia. You're unpredictable, adaptable. Dangerous, I added. She looked at me thoughtfully. Yes, but not in the way I was taught. I'd made her a bed of her own in the corner of the cabin using soft fronds from a local plant similar to a fern. But she rarely used it, preferring instead to sleep outside under the stars when weather permitted. Tonight was one such night. I followed her out, watching as she settled onto the rough bench I'd built along the cabin wall. "You miss it, don't you?" I asked. "The palace, your home." Leary's gaze remained fixed on the unfamiliar constellations. "I miss what it was, what it should be." She turned to me. "What about you? Do you miss Earth?" Sometimes, I admitted, sitting beside her. Specific things: coffee, hot showers, my sister's laugh. "Why don't you go back?" The question hung between us, heavy with the weight of my untold story. "I can't," I finally said, "because you deserted." It wasn't a question. I'd never confirmed it, but she was smart enough to piece it together. "Yes." "Why?" I sighed, running a hand through my beard. 3 years of growth, wild and untamed like the man I'd become. We came here as an exploratory force, scientific mission officially. But there were other objectives: resource identification, strategic evaluation. I paused. Population assessment. Leary tensed beside me. "You were preparing for colonization." "Or worse," I said quietly. "I was a good soldier, followed orders, didn't ask questions, until I found the file." "What files?" "Contingency plans. For if your people resisted our peaceful overtures, tactical assessments of your defenses, weaknesses, potential first strike scenarios." My voice had gone flat, emotionless, the way it did when I remembered. I confronted my commanding officer, Commander Blake Nash. He told me I was being naive, that this was how first contact always worked. Prepare for the worst, hope for the best. I fell silent, remembering Blake's face. We'd been friends once, brothers in arms. "What happened?" Leary prompted gently. I couldn't be part of it. I'd seen enough war, enough death. I tried to go through proper channels, file protests. They were going to court-martial me, lock me away. So I ran. I gestured around us. "Been here ever since." She was quiet for a long moment. "You gave up everything for people you didn't even know." "I gave up everything because it was right," I corrected. "Or at least less wrong than the alternative." Leary's hand found mine in the darkness. Her touch was cool, soothing against my perpetually sun-warmed skin. "My father would have liked you," she said quietly. We sat in companionable silence after that, watching as a meteor shower painted streaks of green and gold across the night sky. Her hand remained in mine, and neither of us seemed inclined to change that. The next morning brought trouble. I was checking my perimeter sensors, crude trip wires connected to metal chimes, when I found one triggered. Someone or something had crossed my boundary to the east, but hadn't continued toward the cabin. Scouting. Testing. I slipped back to the cabin, moving as silently as 3 years of survival had taught me. "We have visitors," I told Leary, who was sorting through edible roots we'd gathered the previous day. Her head snapped up, fear immediately evident in her eyes. "My uncle's hunters. Can't be sure yet, but we need to be ready to move." I pulled my go bag from beneath the bed, always packed, always ready. Old military habits die hard. I added extra water, food, medical supplies. "Here," I said, handing Leary my secondary knife. "Just in case." She took it, testing its weight in her hand. "I know how to use this," she said, surprising me. "Royal children are trained in traditional combat forms." I raised an eyebrow. "Full of surprises, Your Highness." She demonstrated a series of precise movements with the blade. Not exactly Earth combat techniques, but effective nonetheless. "Not bad," I acknowledged, "but let's hope it doesn't come to that." I climbed to the hidden observation post I'd built in the tallest tree near my cabin. From there, I could see much of the surrounding forest through breaks in the canopy. It took only moments to spot them, a squad of 6 moving in standard search pattern, too disciplined for local hunters. But what froze my blood wasn't their number or their weapons. It was their uniforms. "Earth Expeditionary Force," I whispered to myself. I scrambled down the tree and burst into the cabin, startling Leary. "We need to go, now." "What is it?" "Humans, military." I strapped on my knife, grabbed my bow, and slung my rifle over my shoulder. "They're not just here for you anymore. They're here for me too." Her eyes widened. "Your people found you, how?" "I don't know, maybe they never stopped looking." I stuffed a few last essentials into the pack. "Or maybe they detected your ship when you crashed." But why would they care about one deserter after 3 years? A question that had already occurred to me with no good answers. We slipped out through a hidden exit I'd built into the back of the cabin designed to leave no trace. I'd prepared for this day since I first arrived. Multiple escape routes, hidden caches of supplies throughout the forest. It wasn't paranoia if they really were after you. We moved silently, staying low, using the undergrowth for cover. Lyrae had become surprisingly adept at forest movement and movement in our weeks together. Another of those royal talents, perhaps, or simply the incredible adaptability her species possessed. We'd made it nearly half a mile when the sound of a twig snapping behind us made us both freeze. Not bad, Jason. Still moving like a ghost. That voice, I'd know it anywhere. I turned slowly to face Commander Blake Nash. He looked older. More lines around his eyes, more gray in his close-cropped hair. But still the same imposing figure I remembered, tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of presence that commanded attention without effort. Blake, I acknowledged, subtly shifting to put myself between him and Lyrae. 3 years, he said conversationally, as if we were meeting for drinks after a mission. 3 years of hunting ghost stories and false leads. And here you are. His eyes shifted to Lyrae, with interesting company. She's under my protection, I said firmly. Blake's eyebrow rose. Is she now fascinating development? And he studied Lyrae with undisguised interest. Third scion of the House of Eternal Light, if I'm not mistaken. Lyrae stiffened beside me. How do you know that? Your uncle has been most cooperative with our diplomatic mission, Blake replied, including the small matter of a missing royal heir. Quite the reward for your safe return. I felt Lyrae's hand grasp the back of my shirt. He'll kill me, she whispered. I heard that, Blake said, and I'm afraid I find myself skeptical. Regent Valen has expressed nothing but concern for his niece's well-being. You've been played, I told him flatly, exactly like I warned you 3 years ago. You see cooperation alliances, they see opportunity. Norway's the idealist. Blake shook his head. Some things never change. Why are you here, Blake, really? He sighed. You're a loose end, Jason, when I've been ordered to tie up. His hand moved to rest on his sidearm, not drawing it, just reminding me it was there. The situation has evolved since your departure. Earth's position is more delicate than ever. Resources dwindling, population growing. We need allies. We need this planet. And my silence, I finished for him. That would be convenient, yes. I assessed our options, which were few and poor. Blake was between us and the deep forest. Behind us lay the cabin, likely now surrounded by his squad. I had weapons, but Blake wore body armor beneath his uniform's standard procedure for field commanders. I might get one shot, but not before he could fire back. What do you want? I asked, playing for time. Blake smiled thinly. I'm authorized to offer you a deal. Full pardon, honorable discharge. Return to Earth with a generous pension, he paused. In exchange for your complete silence regarding any ethical concerns you may have had about our mission here. And her, I nodded toward Lyrae. She returns to her loving uncle, of course, fulfilling our diplomatic obligations. Lyrae's grip on my shirt tightened. And if I refuse, Blake's smile faded. Then I complete my secondary objective, neutralize the security risk you represent. You'd execute me after everything we've been through. Something flickered in his eyes, regret perhaps, or just an impatience. I'd rather not, he'd admitted. You were a good soldier, a good friend, just misguided. I laughed bitterly. Misguided, that's what you call having a conscience now. Grow up, Jason, the universe isn't black and white. We do what we must for our species' survival, even if it means becoming the monsters we claim to fight. Blake's expression hardened. You have 1 hour to decide. Return to your cabin. Think it over. I'll meet you there for your answer. He stepped back, keeping his eyes on us. Don't try to run. My squad has the area surrounded with motion sensors. The latest tech, not the primitive tripwires you favor. He turned and disappeared into the forest, moving with the same practiced stealth I remembered. He's going to kill us both, Lyrae said once he was out of earshot. Probably, I agreed, but not right away. He needs to know if I've told anyone else about what I have found. Have you? I shook my head. No one to tell out here. We made our way back to the cabin, slowly, minds racing for a solution. Their technology, Lyrae said suddenly. You said it yourself, when technology fails, the old ways work best. I glanced at her. You have an idea. A slow smile spread across her face, the first genuine one I'd seen. My people rely too much on our advanced systems. Your people do too. But you, Jason, you've learned to live without them. I started to understand where she was going with this. The mineral deposits that create the dead zones, but could be used to disrupt their sensors, she finished, if we had enough of it. I thought of the caves to the north. The ones I'd warned her about, home to shadow stalkers, six-limbed predators with chameleonic skin and venomous claws. I'd nearly died the one time I'd ventured too close. I know where to find it, I said grimly, but getting there won't be easy. Leary's eyes met mine, determined and unafraid. Nothing worth doing ever is. In that moment, something shifted between us. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about something more, something neither of us was ready to name. We'll need a diversion, I said, my mind already formulating a plan. Something to buy us time. As we reached the cabin, I noticed Blake's team had set up a perimeter, staying just out of sight, but close enough to respond quickly. Professional, thorough, exactly what I'd expect from an EEF squad. Inside, I gathered what we'd need, my smallest pack, only essential supplies. The less weight, the faster we could move. There's something I need to tell you, Leary said, suddenly, her voice low. About my people. About me. I looked up from my preparations. What is it? She hesitated, then extended her hand, palm up. Before my eyes, her skin shifted, the violet darkening to nearly black, then lightening again. We can alter our biochromatophores, she explained. Not as extensively as some species, but enough to blend when necessary. Royal bloodlines have stronger abilities than most. She demonstrated again, her skin taking on a mottled pattern that would blend perfectly with the forest shadows. I haven't used it because it would drain your energy, I guessed. And you needed every bit to survive. She nodded. It's not just changing color, it's becoming something else, temporarily. That could be incredibly useful, I said, mind racing with new possibilities. If you could distract them while I set up the next phase. Oh, I can do more than distract, she said, and there was a hardness in her voice I hadn't heard before. I am not just a Princess Jason. I am a warrior of the House of Eternal Light. My father trained me himself. I studied her for a long moment, seeing her anew. Not a refugee, not a victim. A fighter like me. All right, I said, new plan. We had less than 30 minutes before Blake would return for my answer. In that time, we transformed the cabin into a death trap. Every snare, every hunting trick I learned in 3 years of survival reconfigured into defensive measures. Leary's knowledge of her people's physiology, and by extension, some of the weaknesses in EEF scanning technology, proved invaluable. Their bioscanners can't distinguish between sentient and non-sentient life forms. She explained as she helped me rig a particularly nasty surprise involving the local equivalent of poison ivy and a pressure trigger. They rely on motion patterns and thermal signatures. So we move like animals. I nodded. Or not at all. Time was running out. I grabbed Leary's shoulders, forcing her to look at me. If this goes wrong, I said urgently, head north. Follow the river upstream until you reach the Red Cliffs. There's a settlement of indigenous Vaynar there, pre-technological. They've stayed hidden from your uncle's regime for generations. They'll help you. We do this together, she insisted, or not at all. I wanted to argue, but there was no time. Blake would be here any minute. Ready, I asked. She nodded, her violet skin already beginning to darken and mottle. Be careful, Jason. You too, princess. And then she was gone, slipping out the hidden exit, becoming one with the shadows. I took my position, seated at my crude table rifle within easy reach, but not in my hands. Non-threatening, but prepared. A gamble. Everything hinged on Blake's lingering sentimentality, if he still had any. Right on time, the door swung open. Blake entered alone, though I had no doubt his squad was positioned strategically outside. Time's up, Jason. His eyes scanned the cabin. Where's the alien girl? Safe, I replied. Beyond your reach. He sighed. I expected better from you. Cooperation would have been easier for everyone. When have I ever taken the easy path? I managed a grim smile. Never, he acknowledged. It's what made you both the best soldier I ever commanded and the biggest pain in my ass. He sat down across from me. Last chance. Come in voluntarily. Tell me where the girl is. We can still work this out. I leaned forward, You know what the right thing to do is, Blake. You've always known. Deep down. Something flickered in his eyes, doubt perhaps. It's not that simple, he said quietly. It is. I held his gaze. You taught me that? Remember Kabul 2039? You said sometimes the hardest part of being a soldier is knowing when not to follow orders. He looked away. I was young, idealistic. You were right. The cabin fell silent, save for the distant sounds of the forest. I could almost see the conflict playing out behind Blake's eyes. The commander versus the man. Duty versus conscience. Then his face hardened. Enough! Where is the... A scream from outside cut him off, then another. Gunfire erupted. Blake's hand flew to his weapon, but I was already moving. I dove across the table, tackling him to the ground. We grappled briefly. He was still strong, still a formidable fighter. But 3 years in the wilderness had honed my survival instincts to a razor's edge. I pinned him, pressing my forearm against his throat. Tell your men to stand down. He glared up at me. Go to hell. Outside chaos continued. The traps were working, and so was Leary from the sounds of the confusion. This doesn't have to end with more bloodshed, I said, easing the pressure slightly so he could speak. It always ends with bloodshed, he spat. That's the reality you couldn't face. A new sound joined the cacophony outside, a high-pitched whine that made my teeth ache. One of the EEF's sonic weapons. Your men are shooting blind, I told Blake. They'll kill each other before they hit us. Something changed in his expression. Concern for his squad men and women under his command. His responsibility. Stand down, he finally shouted. All units stand down. The gunfire stuttered, then ceased. The sonic weapon fell silent. I eased off him cautiously, keeping his sidearm, which I'd removed during our struggle, trained on him. Now what? He asked, sitting up slowly. Now we wait. It took less than a minute for Leary to slip back inside through the hidden entrance. Her skin was returning to its normal violet hue, and there was a wild exhilaration in her eyes that transformed her face. She held a sonic disruptor in one hand, stolen from one of Blake's soldiers, no doubt. 4 incapacitated, she reported, 2 still functional but disoriented. Blake stared at her with newfound respect. 1 alien against 6 trained EEF soldiers, impressive. Your soldiers rely too much on their technology, she replied coolly. A common failing among both our species. I motioned for Blake to stand. We're leaving. You're coming with us. Insurance. He laughed bitterly. And then what? You can't run forever, Jason. Eventually they'll send someone else. Someone who doesn't care that we once were friends. By then we'll be long gone. We bound Blake's hands and exited through the hidden entrance. The forest beyond was eerily quiet, the local wildlife scared off by the commotion. 2 EF soldiers lay unconscious near the perimeter. The others were nowhere in sight. This way, I whispered, leading them toward a game trail only I knew. It would take us north toward the caves, toward our only chance. We moved in silence for nearly an hour, putting distance between us and the cabin. Blake made no attempt to escape or alert his squad, whether from pragmatism or some lingering loyalty, I couldn't tell. They're tracking us, Leary said suddenly, her acute senses picking up what I couldn't. 2 of them, following our trail. I nodded. We'd expected this. Time for phase 2. We'd reached a narrow ravine, steep walls of reddish stone rising on either side, perfect for our purpose. What are you planning? Blake asked, speaking for the first time since we'd left the cabin. I ignored him, setting down my pack and retrieving a small pouch. Inside were crystalline fragments I'd collected over the years, the same mineral deposits that created the dead zones. Cover your ears. I warned, then struck 2 crystals together. The resulting sonic pulse was brief but powerful. Blake winced despite my warning. Above us, the local equivalent of bats erupted from hidden caves in the ravine walls, thousands of them creating a living cloud that would mask our heat signatures from any scanners. Move, I ordered, pushing Blake forward as Leary scouted ahead. We emerged from the ravine into an area I rarely ventured, too dangerous even for me. The trees here grew closer together, their luminescent bark giving off an eerie blue glow. And among them, nearly invisible until they moved, lurked the shadow stalkers. One detached itself from the darkness ahead, 6 limbs rippling with deadly grace. Its skin shifted colors continuously, adapting to its surroundings. Only its eyes' reflective, yellow orbs gave it away. Blake tensed beside me. Jesus Christ. Don't move, I whispered. Their vision is based on movement. The creature paused, head tilting as it sensed our presence. Its mouth opened, revealing rows of needle-like teeth. Beside me, Larry began to change. Her skin darkened to match the shadows, but more than that, her posture, her entire presence seemed to shift. She dropped to a crouch, arms extended, in a stance that mirrored the predator's own. And then she hissed a perfect imitation of the Shadowstalker's own warning sound. The creature froze, confusion evident in its posture. Larry hissed again, more forcefully. Challenge, dominance, display. The Shadowstalker backed away slowly, unwilling to confront what it perceived as a larger, more dangerous member of its own species. Once it had disappeared into the undergrowth, Larry straightened her skin, gradually returning to normal. "Holy shit," I breathed. "Royal training," she said simply. "Know your enemy as yourself." Blake was staring at her with naked amazement. "They said your species was pacifistic, technologically advanced but physically weak." "A useful misconception," she replied. "One my ancestors encouraged." We continued more carefully now. The Shadowstalker territory was extensive, but beyond it lay our goal, a cave system rich with the mineral deposits we needed. The pursuit had fallen behind, confused by our countermeasures. But they wouldn't give up easily. Blake's second-in-command would be organizing a more thorough search pattern, calling in reinforcements. Time was not on our side. We reached the cave entrance as the twin suns began to set, casting long shadows across the forest floor. The opening was small, barely large enough for a human to squeeze through. Beyond it, darkness waited. "In come," I ordered Blake, who hesitated. "There's another option," he said quietly. "Come back with me. Bring the girl. I'll testify that you acted under duress, that you were protecting an indigenous rights leader from corrupt local authorities." I laughed incredulously. "You'd lie for me." "Not entirely a lie." He glanced at Leary. "Her uncle does sound like a piece of work. We could renegotiate our relationship with the Vaynar, establish a more ethical—" "No," Larry interrupted firmly. "Your government has already chosen sides. My uncle's resources in exchange for your military support. The deal is made." Blake fell silent, unable to deny it. "Into the cave," I repeated more forcefully. He sighed and squeezed through the opening. Leary followed with me, taking up the rear. Inside, the darkness was nearly complete, save for a faint blue glow emanating from the walls themselves, the same mineral we sought. I activated a small light I'd fashioned from salvaged ship parts, illuminating a narrow tunnel that descended deeper into the earth. "What now?" Blake asked as we made our way deeper into the cave system. "Now we disappear," I replied. The tunnel opened into a larger chamber where the mineral deposits were far more concentrated. The walls glittered like a galaxy of blue-white stars. The air hummed with energy. "We need to collect as much as we can," I told Leroy. "The concentrations required to affect their tech." She nodded, already moving to the richest veins. "This won't work," Blake said, watching us. "You know that, right? Earth won't stop. We can't stop. There's too much at stake." I paused in my work. "There's always a choice, Blake. Always." "Easy for you to say. You ran. You didn't have to make the hard calls." "Is that what you tell yourself, that sacrificing your humanity is the hard call?" He looked away. "Not everyone has your moral clarity, Jason." A distant rumble interrupted us, not from deeper within the caves, but from the entrance. An explosion. "They've found us," Leary said, her voice tight. I cursed. "We need more time." Blake stood, decision written across his face. "I'll buy you some." Before I could respond, he continued. "I can hold them off. Give you two the chance you need." I stared at him, suspicious. "Why would you help us?" "Because you were right," he said quietly. 3 years ago and now. I've seen what's happening, the compromises, the lines we keep crossing." He held out his hands. "Cut me loose. Let me help." Leary looked at me, and I saw in her eyes that she believed him. After a moment's hesitation, I cut his restraints. "There's a narrow passage that leads to a back exit," Blake said, already moving. "I'll create a diversion. Make them think we're cornered in here." "They'll kill you," I warned. A grim smile crossed his face. "Maybe, but it's time I made the right calls for once." Before I could argue further, he disappeared back up the tunnel toward the entrance. Leary and I worked frantically, gathering the glowing mineral deposits into makeshift bags I'd fashioned from my shirt. The air hummed with increasing energy as explosions and gunfire echoed from the entrance. "This way," I said, leading Larry deeper into the cave system. The passage narrowed until we were forced to crawl the jagged rocks, scraping our skin raw. After what felt like hours, we emerged onto a narrow ledge overlooking a vast underground lake. The surface glowed with the same blue luminescence as the mineral, casting eerie shadows on the cavern walls. "Now what?" Larry asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I pointed to a barely visible path that wound around the lake's edge. "That leads to another exit, one they won't know about." We made our way carefully along the treacherous path. Behind us, the sounds of conflict had faded, replaced by an ominous silence. "Do you think he's—" Larry didn't finish the thought. "Blake's hard to kill," I said, hoping it was true. We reached the far side of the lake and found the narrow crevice that would lead us back to the surface. As we squeezed through, I heard a familiar voice call out, "Jason?" Blake stumbled toward us, blood streaming from a gash on his forehead, his uniform torn and scorched. "You made it." I breathed, genuinely relieved. He nodded grimly. "Barely. They're right behind me. Go. I'll collapse the tunnel." "Come with us," Leary urged. Blake shook his head. "Can't. They have my biometrics. They'd track us in hours." He pressed something into my hand, a small data drive. "But take this. It's everything. The plans, the deals with her uncle, everything you need to expose both sides." I stared at the drive, then back at Blake. "This is treason." "No," he said firmly. "This is duty, real duty. Now go." Larry pulled at my arm. "Jason, we have to move." With a last look at my former commander, my friend, I squeezed through the crevice, Leary close behind me. We emerged into the twilight forest just as a final explosion shook the ground beneath our feet. Rocks and dust billowed from the cave entrance. "Blake," I whispered. Leary's hand found mine. He chose his path. Now we must follow ours. We didn't have time to mourn. With the mineral deposits secured, we set off through the forest, moving as quickly and silently as we could. The twin suns had set completely now, leaving only the bioluminescent flora to guide our way. "We need to get as far from here as possible," I said. "Marty's somewhere to use the minerals to mask our trail completely." Leary nodded, then stopped suddenly. "Wait, I know a place." She led me off our path deeper into territory I'd never explored. After hours of difficult travel, we reached a hidden valley nestled between steep cliffs. At its center stood an ancient structure, a temple of sorts, its stones covered in glowing symbols similar to the markings on Leary's skin. "A sanctuary," she explained. "From the time before technology. My father brought me here once. The minerals in the stones block all scanning." Inside, the air felt charged with something beyond the physical history, perhaps, or whatever passed for spirituality among the Vaynar. We set to work immediately, using the collected minerals to create a barrier around the perimeter. "If this works," I said as we completed our task, "they'll think we died in the cave collapse." Larry nodded, her silver hair catching the soft blue light. "And then," I looked at the data drive Blake had given me, "then we use this. We expose both sides, your uncle, my superiors. All of it." She stepped closer, her eyes searching mine. "And after that," I hadn't thought beyond survival for so long that the question caught me off guard. "I don't know. Find somewhere new. Start over." "Together?" she asked softly. In that moment, everything crystallized. All the days and nights we'd spent together. The way she'd challenged me, taught me, saved me in more ways than one. The strange electricity I felt whenever our skin touched. "Yes," I said, reaching for her. "Together." Her skin felt warm beneath my fingers as I traced the constellation-like patterns that marked her violet flesh. She leaned into my touch, her eyes closing briefly before meeting mine again, now filled with a different kind of intensity. "My people have a belief," she whispered, "that when two souls find each other across the void of stars, it is not by chance, but by design." "I don't believe in destiny," I admitted. "Neither did I," she replied. "Until now." Our lips met, then alien and human, but somehow perfectly matched. The kiss deepened, and with it came a strange sensation, like electricity flowing between us, changing us both at some fundamental level. When we finally parted, I noticed something extraordinary. Where my hands had touched her skin, the violet had lightened slightly, taking on a more human hue. And looking down at my own arms, I saw faint patterns forming echoes of her constellation markings. "What's happening?" I asked, not fearful but amazed. She smiled, touching the newly formed patterns on my skin with wonder. "Our species are compatible after all. More than compatible. Complementary." Her eyes met mine. The old text spoke of this possibility, but it was dismissed as myth. Physiological adaptation, I guessed. "And something more," she said. "Something transcendent." That night, as Earth forces and Vader hunters searched for us in vain, we discovered just how compatible our species truly were. And in that ancient temple, hidden from the conflicts of two worlds, we found something neither of us had expected: home. 3 months passed in our hidden sanctuary. 3 months of peace, of healing, of discovery. The data drive Blake had given us contained everything we needed and more detailed plans for Earth's colonization strategy, proof of my government's deception records of the deals struck with Leary's uncle, evidence of his involvement in her father's assassination. Using the ancient temple's communication technology, primitive by modern standards but untraceable for the same reason, we transmitted the information to every news outlet on both worlds. We became ghost voices from beyond the grave, exposing the corruption that threatened both our species. The impact was immediate and far-reaching. Protests erupted across Earth and Vanar. Lyra's uncle was arrested by his own royal guard. Several high-ranking officials in the Earth Expeditionary Force faced court-martial. Commander Blake Nash was posthumously honored for his sacrifice, his final act of courage, redeeming a lifetime of compromises. But we weren't there to see any of it. We remained in our sanctuary, watching from afar as the world we'd changed continued to transform without us. "Do you regret it?" Leary asked one evening as we sat outside the temple watching the twin moons rise over the valley, leaving everything behind. I considered the question carefully. "I left everything behind long before I met you," I finally said. "When I deserted, when I chose this life." I took her hand, tracing the patterns that now adorned both our skins, mine faint, but growing more prominent each day. Hers lightened to a lavender hue that seemed to glow from within. "But I found more here than I ever had there." She leaned against me, her head resting on my shoulder. "The age of ascension approaches. Technically, I am now the rightful ruler of my people." "Planning to claim your throne, Your Highness?" I teased. She smiled, but there was seriousness behind it. "No, but I do think about them. My people. Yours. What will happen now?" "They'll find their way," I said. "Without corrupt leaders manipulating them, maybe they'll find a better path forward." "Perhaps," she agreed, "but they might need guidance, examples of what could be." I understood what she was suggesting. "You want to go back? Reveal ourselves." "Not yet," she said, her hand moving to rest on her abdomen, where a slight swelling had begun to show. "But someday, after," my heart still skipped whenever I thought about it. "A child. Our child. The first of its kind, half human, half Vanar. Living proof that our species weren't meant to conquer each other, but to complement each other." "After," I agreed, placing my hand over hers. "When the time is right." Later that night, as Larry slept peacefully beside me, I stepped outside to look at the stars. Somewhere up there was Earth, the home I'd left behind, and all around me was Vanar, the world I'd made my own. I'd come here as a soldier, become a deserter, a survivor, a rebel, and now something else entirely, a bridge between worlds, a harbinger of something new. I thought of Blake, of his sacrifice, of Larai's father, murdered for standing in the way of power-hungry men, of all the lives caught in the crossfire of ambition and fear. "It was worth it," I whispered to the night sky. "All of it." Inside, Leary stirred, reaching for me in her sleep. I returned to her side, to the warmth of her embrace, to the promise of our shared future. I'd snared more than an alien princess that day in the forest. I'd caught a new beginning. 1 year later, I stood at the entrance to our valley, watching as a small ship descended through the clouds. It bore no military markings, no royal insignia, just a simple white flag of truce. Behind me, Leary approached our daughter, cradled in her arms. Talia was 4 months old now. Her skin a perfect blend of human peach and Vanar violet, her eyes the same impossible amethyst as her mother's, but with flecks of my own brown. Silver blonde hair curled around her chubby face as she gurgled happily, reaching out with tiny fingers that already showed faint constellation patterns. "Are you ready for this?" Leary asked, leaning against me. I nodded, though uncertainty still gnawed at me. "As ready as I'll ever be." The message had come 3 days ago, a request for a meeting from Earth's new diplomatic envoy and Vayaner's interim council. They'd found us, or at least suspected our location. But instead of hunters or soldiers, they'd sent diplomats. A promising sign, the ship landed gracefully at the valley's edge. Its ramp extended, and 3 figures emerged, 1 human, 2 Vanar. I recognized the human immediately. Amenir Dr. Elena Reyes, a respected xenoanthropologist who had always advocated for peaceful first contact protocols. One of the Vanar was Leire's cousin Toran, who had been named interim leader after her uncle's removal. The other was unfamiliar to me, but wore the robes of a Vanar scholar. They approached slowly, hands empty, faces open. "Lieutenant Holt," Dr. Reyes greeted me, then corrected herself. "Jason, it's an honor to finally meet you." "I'm not a lieutenant anymore," I reminded her. She smiled. "No, you're something far more important now, a pioneer." Toran bowed deeply to Lyra. "Cousin, you look different, but well." Lyra inclined her head regally. "As do you, Toran. Leadership suits you." His eyes fell to the child in her arms, and he gasped softly. "Then it's true, the rumors—" "This is Talia," Lyra said, shifting our daughter so they could see her more clearly. "The first of her kind, but not, we hope, the last." The Vanar scholar stepped forward, eyes wide with wonder. Physiological compatibility and genetic viability between our species was theorized but never proven. She looked from Lyra to me. "Until now." "Why are you here?" I asked, getting to the point. "Dr. Brown." Reyes straightened her shoulders. "Both our worlds are changing, Jason. The revelations you and Lyra exposed have transformed everything. Old regimes have fallen. New leaders have emerged. But there's still fear, mistrust." "Understandable," Lyra commented. "After generations of conditioning." "Yes," Toran agreed. "Which is why we need you, both of you, and your child." I tensed. "What exactly are you asking, Bob?" "Not asking," Dr. Reyes clarified. "Offering a chance to help shape what comes next. A new kind of relationship between our species. Not based on conquest or exploitation, but on mutual benefit. True cooperation." Lyra and I exchanged glances. We discussed this possibility, but never truly believed it would come. "And if we refuse?" Lyra asked. "Then we leave," Toran said simply. "Your location remains secret. Your choice is respected." "But—" He hesitated, his eyes on Talia again. "Consider what your daughter represents. What her existence could mean for both our peoples." The truth of his words resonated deeply. Talia wasn't just our child. She was living proof that humans and Vanar could not only coexist but create something beautiful together. A symbol more powerful than any treaty or agreement. "We need time to discuss this," I said finally. Dr. Reyes nodded. "Of course, we'll return tomorrow for your answer." They departed as peacefully as they had arrived, leaving us to make perhaps the most important decision of our lives. That night, as Talia slept peacefully in the cradle I'd carved for her, Lyra, and I sat beneath the stars, weighing our options. "We could stay here," I said, "continue our life together, just the 3 of us. Safe, hidden." "We could," Lyra agreed. "But is that fair to Talia? To grow up isolated, never knowing her heritage, her potential role?" I sighed, knowing she was right. "And if we go back, become these symbols they want us to be, then we risk everything. Our privacy, our safety, perhaps even our relationship." She took my hand. "But we also have the chance to ensure that what happened to us, to your friend Blake, to my father, never happens again." We talked long into the night, weighing fear against hope, caution against possibility. Dawn was breaking when we finally reached our decision. When the ship returned the next day, we were waiting. Talia in Larry's arms, our meager possessions, packed our sanctuary, prepared for a long absence. "We'll come with you," I told the delegation, "on one condition." "Name it," Dr. Reyes said eagerly. I looked at Lyra, drawing strength from her presence. "We're not propaganda. We're not tools. We're a family. We'll tell our stories, show what's possible between our species. But we do it our way, on our terms." Toran and Dr. Reyes exchanged glances, then nodded in agreement. "One more thing," Lyra added. "We want to establish a settlement here. A place where others like us, humans and Vanar, who wish to build a life together, can come. A new beginning. A colony, the Vayner scholar asked. No, I corrected firmly. Not a colony, a home. Built together, not imposed by one side on the other. As we boarded the ship that would take us back to a world I'd fled 3 years before, I felt no regret, only purpose. Talia gurgled happily in her mother's arms, unaware of her historic significance, the boundaries she'd already broken simply by existing. Lyra's hand found mine as the ship rose above our valley sanctuary. Are you ready? She asked softly. I smiled, thinking of all we'd been through. How a chance encounter, a princess caught in a hunter's trap, had changed everything. For us, for our worlds? Ready, I confirmed, squeezing her hand gently. After all, we've already done the impossible. She returned my smile, her amethyst eyes bright with the same hope I felt. Which part? Surviving, exposing the truth, creating new life between our species. All of it, I said, but mostly finding each other across the stars. They snared each other, Lyra murmured, looking down at our daughter, not with traps, but with something stronger, trust. As our ship broke through the atmosphere, heading toward a future neither of us could have imagined, I knew she was right. In the end, we'd both been caught and freed by the most powerful force in any universe, and nothing would ever be the same again. If you enjoyed this story of survival, forbidden love, and two species finding unexpected common ground, hit that like button and subscribe for more original sci-fi adventures. Comment below with what kind of human-alien romance you'd like to hear next. Are you into stories with elemental aliens, shapeshifters, or maybe beings made of pure energy? Let me know and I'll bring your wildest interspecies romance dreams to life in my next upload.